Kevin in Dallas. Hi.
Oh, detailed. Awesome.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing well. I love the show. And
Thanks.
I met Russell at ApostaCon in Dallas in 2015.
Oh, yeah, that was a good time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Just to give you a bit of background, I listened to Dogma Debate, and one of his Christian apologist listeners was there and gave out his email address, and something he said irked me, so I emailed him.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. We started a discussion, and there were many avenues of discussion that we could take, but after reading How to Create an Atheist by Peter Boghossian, I decided I would try to waste as little time as possible and try to get him to realize that faith was an unreliable path to knowledge.
Okay. Good luck with that.
Yeah. I started out by asking, as Matt does, if there's any position he could not take on faith, and he didn't understand this question. It took him a while to even understand my definition of faith, which is belief without sufficient evidence, because according to him, everything takes faith because we do not have absolute knowledge. We went around and around on our two definitions, and I intended to ask him why he departed from both the biblical definition and the dictionary definition. And as we were getting there, he said he thought we should end the conversation. So my question is how to proceed when you and atheists have a different definition of faith.
So I was on my high school debate team, and early on, I got in a debate where most of the back and forth argument was on arguing whose definition was right. This actually was a guy who was a senior when I was like a junior or something, and he was way more experienced than me. But I felt pretty good about how it had gone, but I got completely ripped. I mean, I was crushed by the judge. And I talked to another member of the team later, and they said, never waste time in an entire debate going round and round on definitions. There are so much more productive things you can be doing. And in my experience talking to lots and lots of people on this show, I've come to realize that one of the things that annoys the people you're talking to most and guarantees that you're not going to have a constructive decision or discussion is trying to tell them what they believe and putting words in their mouth and not listening to and understanding what they are telling you they believe. So, what do you believe and why isn't just a platitude. It's a way of opening a conversation because you have to actually make an effort to reach out to the other person and understand where they're coming from. And when you spend a lot of time just arguing about what definition they're using and say, no, you shouldn't use that definition, you should just come over to my definition, it's generally a communication breakdown because it doesn't advance the actual thing you want to talk about, which is what do they really believe? Like, forget the words that they're using. If they want to say, to take a typical example, atheism is just another religion, I used to argue, no, it's not. It's totally not a religion. But that doesn't go anywhere. And what I found is a better way to approach the question is saying something like, what do you mean when you say a religion? And you can listen to what they are trying to tell you, and you can ask them for clarification, but you can conditionally accept the words that they are using. You can note in passing, well, that's not the way I use the word, but sure, you could say under that very narrow definition of religion, I will grant you that atheism is a religion, so what? Or in your case, you were talking about the use of the word faith. Now, when I talk about faith, I generally say faith is a bad thing. And I would say that faith is overconfident belief in something that you have no good reason to believe. But you can discuss the idea of that without insisting that that person come around to your idea. I mean, conversation is a lot of give and take. and trying to understand what they're really trying to tell you instead of just getting bogged down in what word they're using and whether you mean the same word, the same thing by that word as they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just, I had basically a game plan for how to get him to understand where I was trying to go, but I couldn't figure out why he thought the way he did, and he was not really explaining that. Like, I think, like, I kept on asking him questions, trying to get to understand his position better, and he would basically answer them really poorly, and it was very hard to get anywhere.
Right. Did you ever consider the possibility that he's just a bad communicator and it's not your fault? Like, you went into this trying to win and trying to change his mind and getting him to drop his theism, but I can tell you from experience that that rarely works. It's a nice surprise when it does, but that shouldn't necessarily be your goal in every conversation.
Yes, and I was, I'd like to try to use that, the manual for creating atheists. I was basically trying to use this as a practice run, and it didn't work very well because I was stuck on a definition that made absolutely no sense, and I couldn't get him to tell me why he would go with that definition.
Right. Well, I'm not Peter Boghossian, and I have to admit I've flipped through his book, but I haven't read the whole thing. So, I mean, you'd maybe have to ask Peter why he thinks his approach didn't work, but maybe it just doesn't work. He's not infallible. Or maybe you weren't applying it right, but I'm not going to assume, I don't ever assume going into a conversation that there's a magic bullet that will convert somebody to an atheist, because if I thought that, then there would be a lot more atheists in the world.
Yes.
Yes, and I will also say, you said that that you had a plan going into this in particular, and that because of that definition, and that you I guess you couldn't come to grips with an agreeable definition of that word, it kind of threw off your plan. But I would also say in your future endeavors, trying to apply Peter's, that type of method, that epistemology type of method, that you might have to be a little bit more flexible in your conversations, not to expect that things are going to go according to that plan, and when they don't, you don't really have a way to recover at that point. It's like, the definition, you got hung up on that, and because you did, the conversation couldn't really progress according to the plan that you had, whether you adapted it from the book or if that's what the book had specified. But I would say just to be, I guess, a little less rigid on that portion, to be a little more flexible to actual conversation, trying to understand where that other individual is coming from, and there's no guarantee that that other individual is going to be able to explain themselves to your satisfaction. They may not have the vocabulary, have the words, or even know what it is that they really mean in order to relay that to you concretely, so that you understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and if I were in your position, I might consider making an approach like, hey, I feel like we got off on the wrong foot and I was maybe coming across as too aggressive. Can we start over? Because even though it feels like a blow to the pride, there is nothing that flatters people more when you're talking to them than an admission that you were wrong about something. Or at least, you weren't necessarily wrong about the point you were trying to prove, but that you recognize that you took the wrong approach and put them off. And telling somebody, I really want to understand what you're coming from. Can we talk about it in this way?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say about just coming from an earnest position to say, I was really trying to understand where you were coming from when you were using the word faith, but I wasn't understanding the way you were explaining it to me. Could you try in another way because I really want to understand where you're coming from and really want to nail down what it is that you think faith is, so that we can actually have a meaningful conversation going forward. and approaching it from that, not a combative way, just like, hey, I really want to understand. Like, I'm from an earnest position trying to understand what you're saying.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with just flat out saying, I don't agree with that. And not making it, you're absolutely wrong. Because even if you think that somebody is absolutely wrong, saying it in a way that personalizes it and saying, well, you could be right, but you're not convincing me. Like, if they don't care about convincing you, they just want to do mental masturbation and say the things they believe over and over again, maybe the conversation isn't going to go anywhere, and that's fine. You just take that as a lesson learned that, sometimes you just cut your losses and don't waste your time.
Yeah, that was part of my plan because there were multiple categories that we could discuss, but I thought if we could come to an agreement on this point, and I didn't know I knew that we would be talking past each other if we didn't agree on this point. So that's the main reason why I tried to stick on that point, because I thought we would be able to come to agreement on it, and I thought we were getting there, and then you said, we're not going to come to an agreement, basically.
Yeah, well, getting good at conversations with theists is an ongoing process, and you don't necessarily need to fixate on getting it right with one person.
Yeah.
It's a battle, not the whole war. Although it's not really a war necessarily, it's just trying to understand people and maybe make a positive impact on some people you meet as much as you can.
All right.
All right?
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thank you for calling.